Imagine checking your phone and seeing a message from someone you desperately wanted to hear from. Except the message isn't what you hoped for. Maybe they don't want you anymore. Maybe they chose someone else. Maybe they betrayed you. Maybe they simply disappeared. You stare at the screen. You replay every conversation. You wonder what you could have said differently. And even though the moment lasted only a few seconds, your mind keeps living inside it for days, weeks, sometimes years. But here's the strange part. The person may have already moved on. The situation may already be over. The door may already be closed. Yet somehow, you are still standing in front of it. This is one of the quietest forms of suffering. Not losing something, but refusing to release what has already been lost. And the Stoics understood something about this that most people spend years learning. You don't always suffer because life took something from you. Sometimes, you suffer because you keep demanding that life give it back. And once you understand that distinction, letting go stops looking like surrender. It starts looking like freedom. But there's a deeper question. What exactly are we supposed to let go of? A person? A memory? An outcome? Anger? Regret? Or perhaps something much harder, the life we thought we were going to have? Because this is where Stoicism becomes uncomfortable. It doesn't promise that you won't lose. It teaches you how to stop losing yourself every time you do. The first thing you must let go of. Most people think letting go means forgetting. It doesn't. You can remember someone without needing them back. You can love someone without needing them to love you. You can acknowledge that something mattered without demanding that it continue forever. That distinction is incredibly important, because the goal of Stoicism isn't to turn you into a person who feels nothing. It is to become a person who isn't ruled by everything they feel. Epictetus built much of his philosophy around a simple distinction. Some things are within our control. Other things are not. Your judgments, your choices, your actions, your responses, these belong to you. But another person's feelings, their decisions, their opinion of you, the past, the outcome of every situation, those things were never completely yours to control. And this creates a strange problem. We often spend the most energy trying to control the things we never owned in the first place. Think about rejection. Someone doesn't choose you, and suddenly your mind begins negotiating with reality. What if I had behaved differently? What if I had called sooner? What if I had been more interesting? What if I had tried harder? But beneath all these questions is one hidden desire. I want reality to become different. And reality doesn't negotiate. The relationship ended. The opportunity disappeared. The person made their decision. The moment passed. You can learn from it. You can grieve it. You can improve because of it. But you cannot travel backward and renegotiate what already happened. And this is where letting go begins. Not with forgetting, with acceptance. Acceptance is not defeat. There is a dangerous misunderstanding about acceptance. People hear the word and imagine weakness. They think, if I accept what happened, I'm giving up. But Stoicism says something very different. Acceptance doesn't mean you approve of what happened. It means you stop wasting your strength arguing with the fact that it happened. Imagine standing in the middle of a storm and becoming angry because the rain refuses to stop. You can shout at the sky. You can curse the clouds. You can demand sunshine. But none of that changes the weather. The only question that matters is, what will you do now? That is the Stoic shift. Not, why is this happening to me? But, given that this is happening, what is now within my control? That single question can change your entire relationship with suffering. You lose the job. The Stoic doesn't pretend it doesn't hurt. They ask, what can I do next? You are rejected. You don't pretend rejection feels good. You asked, what does this reveal, and how should I respond? Someone insults you. You don't have to enjoy it. You simply recognize their words belong to them. My response belongs to me, and suddenly, something changes. The event may still be painful, but it no longer owns the entire room inside your mind. The person you keep arguing with, there is another kind of attachment that is even more subtle. Sometimes the person isn't physically present anymore, but you're still arguing with them. In your imagination, you replay the conversation. Except this time, you finally say the perfect thing. You finally win. They finally understand what they did. They finally regret losing you. You imagine the apology, the explanation, the moment when they realize your value, and for a few seconds, it feels satisfying. But then reality returns, and you realize something painful. You're having arguments with someone who isn't even in the room. You're allowing a person who may no longer think about you to occupy enormous amounts of your attention. This is where letting go becomes an act of self-respect. You don't need them to understand you before you can move forward. You don't need an apology before you can heal. You don't need them to admit they were wrong. You don't need the final conversation. Sometimes closure isn't something another person gives you. Sometimes closure is the moment you decide, I am no longer giving this situation more of my life. Think about how powerful that is. Not revenge, not bitterness, not pretending you never cared, just withdrawal. You take your attention back, and attention is one of the most valuable things you possess, because wherever your attention goes, your life follows. But what if you can't let go? Now we reach the harder problem. What if you've tried? You tell yourself, I'm moving on, but 3 days later, the memory returns. A photograph, a song, a place, a name, and suddenly you're back there. This is where many people make another mistake. They try to force themselves not to feel. They think, I shouldn't still be sad. I shouldn't still be angry. I should be over this by now. But resistance can create another layer of suffering. First, you experience the emotion. Then you become angry at yourself for experiencing it. Now you're suffering twice. Stoicism doesn't require you to become a machine. You can feel grief. You can feel disappointment. You can feel anger. You can feel fear. The difference is that you don't automatically turn those feelings into commands. You can say, I feel angry, without saying, therefore I must act angrily. You can say, I miss them, without saying, therefore I must go back. You can say, this hurts, without saying, this pain must control my entire life. That is emotional freedom. The emotion can exist without becoming your master. The second thing to let go of, the outcome. There is something else that destroys peace. Attachment to results. You work hard, you expect success, you don't get it, and suddenly you feel like the universe has betrayed you. But consider this, did you ever truly control the outcome? You could control your preparation, your effort, your discipline, your decisions, but not every variable surrounding the result. Marcus Aurelius spent much of his life dealing with circumstances he couldn't simply command away: war, political instability, disease, personal loss, and the unpredictability of an enormous empire. His philosophy repeatedly returned to the importance of governing one's own mind and actions rather than demanding control over the entire world. And that lesson matters today, because modern life constantly tells you, get the result, make it happen, never accept failure, control your destiny. Ambition is valuable, but there is a difference between ambition and attachment. Ambition says, I will give this my best. Attachment says, if I don't get exactly what I want, I cannot be okay. The first creates effort. The second creates anxiety. You can work towards success without worshipping the outcome. You can chase the goal without allowing the goal to determine your worth. And that is one of the hardest forms of letting go. You don't let go of effort. You let go of the demand that effort must always produce the result you imagined. The paradox of control. Think about an archer. The archer can choose the bow. They can prepare their stance. They can study the distance. They can steady their breathing. They can aim carefully. They can release the arrow. But once the arrow leaves the bow, the wind exists, the distance exists, unexpected movement exists, the target may shift, the outcome is no longer completely theirs. This is the spirit behind one of the most useful Stoic ideas. Your responsibility is to perform your role well, not to control the universe's response to your performance. So do your work, apply for the job, build the business, make the video, have the difficult conversation, train, study, create, try. But then, release, not because you don't care, because you understand the limits of your control. And strangely enough, when you stop demanding certainty from the outcome, you often become better at the process. You're calmer, you think more clearly, you take smarter risks, you recover faster, and you stop turning every disappointment into a judgment about your worth. The past doesn't need your permission to stay the past. Now let's go somewhere deeper. Regret. This is where letting go becomes extremely difficult. Because the past is seductive. Your mind tells you, if only I had noticed earlier, if only I had taken the opportunity, if only I had trusted myself, if only I had walked away, if only I had started sooner, if only I had said something. And the imagination creates an alternate universe, a universe where you made the perfect decision, where you avoided the mistake, where everything worked out. But there is a problem. That universe doesn't exist. There is only this one. And every hour you spend trying to mentally rewrite yesterday is an hour you cannot use to build tomorrow. This doesn't mean ignoring your mistakes. Quite the opposite. A Stoic studies mistakes. But there is a difference between reflection and punishment. Reflection asks, what can I learn? Punishment asks, how many times can I make myself suffer for what I already know? One produces wisdom. The other produces exhaustion. So look backward, but only long enough to collect the lesson, then turn around. Because the past is a teacher. It is not your permanent address, the midpoint question, but everything we've discussed so far leads to one uncomfortable question. What if you're not actually suffering because you lost something? What if you're suffering because you believe you were entitled to keep it? Think about that. You loved someone. You thought they would stay. You built a picture of the future. Then reality interrupted. And the pain isn't only, I lost them. It's, they weren't supposed to leave. That second sentence is where much of the suffering lies. Because now you're fighting reality itself. You are saying, this shouldn't have happened. But reality doesn't respond to the word should. It simply is. And this is one of the deepest Stoic lessons. The world doesn't owe us permanence. People change. Bodies age. Opportunities disappear. Plans fail. Relationships evolve. Money comes and goes. Reputations rise and fall. Even the people we love most are temporary parts of our journey. This isn't meant to be depressing. It's meant to make you awake. Because once you understand that everything external is temporary, you stop treating temporary things as if they were permanent possessions. And you begin to appreciate them differently. Love without possession. This is especially powerful when it comes to relationships. Stoicism does not require you to become emotionally detached from everyone. You can love deeply, but you must remember, love is not ownership. You don't own another person's future. You don't own their choices. You don't own their feelings. And you certainly don't own time. So when you love someone, love them fully. Be present. Be loyal. Be kind. Give your best. But don't make the mistake of believing, if I love this person enough, they must stay. They might not. And that possibility is not an argument against love. It is an argument for appreciating love while it exists. Think about holding water in your hand. If you squeeze harder because you're afraid of losing it, you may force it out between your fingers. But if you hold your hand open, you can experience what is there without pretending you own it forever. This is the paradox. Sometimes the healthiest way to love something is to accept that you cannot keep it forever. Letting go of who you used to be. And now we reach something even deeper. Sometimes the person you're struggling to let go of is yourself. The old you. The person you were 5 years ago. The person who made the mistake. The person who stayed too long. The person who trusted the wrong people. The person who wasted time. The person who didn't know what you know now. You look back and think, how could I have been so stupid? But remember something. You are judging your past self using knowledge your past self didn't have. That's an unfair trial. The person you were had limited information, limited experience, limited awareness. And yes, sometimes they made terrible decisions. Learn from them, but don't spend the rest of your life beating someone who no longer exists. You don't have to defend your past. You don't have to worship it either. You simply have to outgrow it. The strongest form of letting go may be saying, I forgive myself for not knowing what I know now. And then proving that forgiveness through your actions. What letting go is not. Let's make one thing clear. Letting go does not mean becoming passive. If someone treats you badly, you can leave. If a situation is unhealthy, you can change it. If you've made a mistake, you can correct it. If someone hurts you, you can establish boundaries. Acceptance doesn't mean tolerating everything. It means seeing reality clearly enough to respond intelligently. A Stoic isn't a person who says, whatever happens, happens. A Stoic asks, what is mine to do? That question is incredibly powerful, because it converts helplessness into responsibility. Maybe you cannot control whether they apologize, but you can decide whether you continue waiting. Maybe you cannot change what happened, but you can decide what it means for the person you're becoming. Maybe you cannot control whether the opportunity returns, but you can prepare yourself for the next one. Maybe you cannot control how people see you, but you can control whether you live according to your values. That is the difference between surrendering your life and surrendering what was never yours to control. The quiet power of walking away. There comes a moment when letting go becomes physical. You stop checking. You stop explaining. You stop chasing. You stop rereading. You stop looking for signs. You stop asking mutual friends what they are doing. You stop imagining the perfect message. You stop trying to prove your worth. Not because you stopped caring overnight, but because you finally understand the cost of continuing. There is a quiet dignity in walking away from what you cannot control. No dramatic announcement. No final performance. No need to make everyone understand. Just, this is no longer worthy of my attention. And then you redirect your attention toward your life, your work, your health, your relationships, your character, your future. This is where something beautiful happens. The energy you once spent trying to change the past becomes energy you can use to build the future. The freedom of not needing closure. People often say, I need closure. But sometimes what they really mean is, I need the other person to tell me a story that makes the pain make sense. And perhaps they never will. People can leave without explaining themselves. They can misunderstand you. They can tell their version of the story. They can never recognize the effort you made. You may never receive the apology you deserved. And this is painful. But your life cannot remain suspended waiting for someone else to complete the final chapter. Sometimes closure is not a conversation. It's a decision. You decide that you have learned enough. You decide that you have suffered enough. You decide that you don't need another explanation to continue living. And that decision doesn't erase what happened. It simply prevents what happened from continuing to happen inside your mind. The final attachment. But there is one final thing. And it may be the hardest thing to let go of. Your imagined future. Not the person. Not the opportunity. Not even the past. The future you thought was guaranteed. Maybe you imagined the marriage, the career, the business, the house, the lifestyle, the version of yourself you thought you would become. Then something happened. And suddenly you're grieving a future that never existed. This is a strange kind of grief because there is no photograph of it. No physical object to bury. But you can still feel its absence. And the Stoic response isn't, don't dream. Dream, plan, build, hope, but hold your plans with open hands. Because wisdom means knowing the difference between, this is what I want and this is what must happen. The first is desire. The second is attachment. And attachment turns uncertainty into fear. When you release the demand that life follow your exact script, you become available for possibilities you couldn't have imagined. The future may not look like the one you lost, but that doesn't mean it cannot become meaningful. Sometimes the door you spend years mourning was simply not the door your life was meant to end at. The Stoic practice. So how do you actually practice letting go? Not tomorrow, today. When something happens that disturbs you, pause. Before reacting, ask, is this within my control? If it is, act. If it isn't, release the struggle against it. Then ask, what is still mine? Your judgment, your behavior, your next decision, your character, your attention, your time, your response. Those are where your power remains. And when your mind returns to the thing you're trying to release, don't panic. Simply notice it. I'm thinking about it again. Then return. Return to the present. Return to the work. Return to the person in front of you. Return to your life. You don't have to defeat every thought. You simply have to stop feeding every thought. And slowly, the thing that once consumed your mind becomes smaller. Not because it disappeared, but because you grew larger than it. The deepest meaning of letting go. Maybe this is what the Stoics were really pointing toward. Freedom isn't getting everything you want. Because if your freedom depends on getting everything you want, you will always be vulnerable. Someone can disappoint you. Life can interrupt your plans. Circumstances can change. And suddenly your peace disappears. Real freedom is different. It is the ability to say, I would prefer this, but I can survive without it. I want them to understand, but I don't need them to. I hope this would happen, but I can accept another outcome. I wish the past were different, but I will use the past instead of living inside it. That is strength. Not controlling the world. Controlling the relationship between the world and your mind. The person who lets go. Imagine two people experiencing the same loss. The first spends years asking, why me? Why did they leave? Why wasn't I enough? Why didn't things go according to plan? The second asks, this happened. I didn't choose it. I didn't want it, but it is here. So what will I do with it? Same event, different response, different life. The second person may still cry. They may still miss what they lost. They may still have difficult days. Stoicism doesn't promise invulnerability. It offers something better. Direction. It teaches you where to place your energy. And when you understand that, letting go stops being about losing. It becomes about choosing. Choosing not to chase what has already left. Choosing not to punish yourself for what cannot be changed. Choosing not to surrender today's peace to yesterday's pain. Choosing to put down the weight you've been carrying simply because you've carried it for so long. Return to the beginning. Remember the person staring at their phone, waiting for the message, replaying the conversation, wondering what they could have done differently. Maybe the message never comes. Maybe the explanation never arrives. Maybe the relationship really is over. And yet, there is still something that person can reclaim. Not the relationship, not the past, not the other person's decision. Something more valuable. Their attention, their time, their dignity, their ability to live in the present. Because the final act of letting go isn't saying, I never cared. It's saying, I cared. It mattered. It hurt. And I'm still choosing to move forward. That is different. That is not weakness. That is acceptance with courage. The final lesson: one day, you will lose things, people, opportunities, possessions, versions of yourself, plans, years, moments you thought would last forever. You cannot prevent every loss. You cannot control every outcome. You cannot make every person stay. But you can decide what happens after the loss. You can carry the wound forever, or you can carry the lesson. You can keep asking the past to change, or you can allow the present to become your new beginning. You can keep holding the closed door, or you can finally turn around and notice the road behind you. And perhaps that is the art of letting go, not caring less, not loving less, not becoming colder, but understanding that love without possession is possible, ambition without attachment is possible, grief without permanent imprisonment is possible, memory without living in the past is possible, and peace without controlling the world is possible. You don't have to force yourself to forget. You don't have to pretend it didn't hurt. You don't have to become emotionless. You simply have to stop handing your present to something that belongs to your past. So if there is something you've been carrying, a person, a regret, a rejection, an unanswered question, an outcome, or a version of life that never happened, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, is this still mine to carry? If the answer is no, put it down, not because it wasn't important, but because your life is still happening, and you are still here. The past may have shaped you. It does not have to imprison you. The world may remain unpredictable. People may still disappoint you. Plans may still collapse. But you no longer have to become chaotic every time the world becomes chaotic. You can breathe. You can accept. You can choose. And then, you can let go. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can hold on to is the courage to release what you were never meant to control. If this changed the way you think about control, subscribe to Marble and Meditations. Because the goal isn't simply to learn Stoicism. It is to practice it, one decision, one reaction, and one moment of letting go at a time.